Welcome to Help More, Stress Less for National Volunteer Week.
I am absolutely delighted to be here with you. Volunteering is something to all of us, and it's a particular passion of mine. I began volunteering when I was 10 on the hand of my parents, and I've been doing it ever since. I've been trying to find a year when I've gone without volunteering, and I couldn't think of one. I've also been very fortunate to be able to teach people how to win over stress since 1989. And as a result, I do a few special projects outside of my usual volunteer work each year, and this is one of them. Being able to share some of the tips and secrets that I've gained over the years as a volunteer that have kept me going with over some of the bumps and some of the challenges that we encounter. As we go through this Help More, Stress Less webinar, I'd like you to be sure to stay in your comfort zone. When we talk about burnout and stress, we tend to touch on some personal topics, and so keep in mind that it's your choice to share any information about personal things. We're recording the session so that we can share it with you, so that you can have a reminder, but we've actually structured it in a way so that we're keeping all of your comments and your information anonymous. So, for example, we will use polls in which you can send an anonymous answer. You'll have an option to send me private comments, which others won't see. And so you're able to participate without having to worry about losing your anonymity. You can change your mind about how much you participate at any time. So if you feel like hopping in, doing lots of polls, or chatting at the beginning, feel free. But if you decide you just like to sit back a bit and watch and listen, then that's also your choice. And we have a lot of different perspectives and experiences around stress and burnout. And so it's important that as we go through this, we keep in mind that everyone has their own perspective and that we respect that kind of diversity in views. And if at any time you're feeling uncomfortable and want to leave the session, then please feel free to do so. Just step out. And I have a dashboard that lets me see when people leave. And I'm a mom. And if you drop off, I will worry about you. So please send me a quick private message through the questions or send an email after, just to let me know that everything is okay. Please keep in mind that I'm not able So we have a few objectives that folks alluded to when they did the seminar survey at the beginning, and thanks so much for taking the time to do that. The first is to identify the signs that you may be on the road to burnout. The second was to describe the 3-point stress check for keeping your stress levels under control. The third was to list some rewards and challenges of volunteering. And then the last, but certainly not the least important, was to describe 5 practical strategies that you can use to burnout-proof your life and increase your enjoyment of volunteering. And I'd like you to take a moment to think about what's most important for you today. We're going to touch on all of the topics in some way, but I'd like you to think about which one is most important to you. And if you'd like to put that in the questions, then let's go ahead and we'll go through these and then see how people's priorities go. Now let's begin by looking on the bright side. It really struck me the number of you that have taken the time to be on the webinar today instead of being outside where the weather is actually finally turning to spring or having your lunch. And to me, that spoke a lot about your commitment to volunteering. Being a volunteer has a lot of rewards. We get a lot from volunteering. And those of you that answered the survey actually communicated a wide number of different rewards that you all obtained. Here are some of them. Across the board, everyone talked about the appreciation that they get from others. Seeing the smile on your patients' faces, getting positive comments, seeing the appreciation and hearing how clients are so happy with what you do and with your program. What someone described as warm fuzzies. There is also a really strong theme around connections and relationships with others. People talked about making more friends, connecting with other people with common interests, rebuilding communities and building them, having a sense of belonging, being part of a bigger picture, and even sometimes volunteering as a family. Another big area of rewards for volunteering came from personal growth and learning. People talked about doing something of value with their lives, experiencing new tasks and learning, finding that the humbling experiences of volunteering helped to put their life into perspective. And sometimes the skills that people got from volunteering were very concrete. Improving English, using skills that you don't use at work, and in general, people talked about doing what they felt that they were called to do. Pride in contributing and making a difference in the community was another huge area. All of you talked in different ways about the importance of contributing a solution to the problems and issues at hand, knowing that someone or something will be a little better based on what you're doing, knowing that you're making a difference and having a positive impact on your community. The sense of satisfaction and purpose just came across really strongly. I'm just going to put a pause briefly here because I just got a comment from someone that your slides aren't advancing. So if you're having that same problem, please take a quick moment to put your hand up. It looks like we should be back on track. Thanks for flagging that. Hopefully we'll make it through without any more glitches. We have a, 3 glitch quota? So the sense of satisfaction and purpose was enormous. The gratitude of giving back, feeling good about helping and being needed. Talking about the joy of helping others help themselves, and that could be people or animals. The sense of purpose, accomplishment, and the satisfaction of giving from the heart. Someone talked about the fact that it's a blessing to give to others, knowing that they're making a difference, and that it just plain feels good to help. So I'd like you to pause and think about the rewards that you get personally from volunteering. Is it from the appreciation from others? Is it the connections and relationships with others? Is it the personal growth and learning that you achieve? Your pride in contributing and making a difference? Or is it your sense of purpose or satisfaction? And it's important that we pause and think about what rewards we get from volunteering, because this is something that keeps us going. It fuels us. There are going to be bumps in the road, we know that. But one of the things that helps us keep everything in perspective is recognizing the rewards that we get. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'd like you to write down your reward, because this is going to be part of what we put together as we sort of assemble a program for you for burnout proofing. So we know that there are a myriad of rewards that we get from volunteering. So why is it that even volunteers get the blues sometimes? I've been there. We begin the day as a relaxed volunteer, eager, ready to go, and by the end of the day, we're stressed, worn out, and ragged. Now, we talk a lot about stress, but what is stress anyway? If you haven't had a moment to watch the Burnout or Standout video, there's a link to it in your invitation. Please take a moment to do that. And let's drill down a bit more here. Now, I'm a dictionary gal, so when I was trying to understand more about stress, dictionary was a great place to start because it says that stress is a challenge, a pressure, or a demand. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, when you think about it, small amounts of stress, small amounts of challenges, pressures, or demand are good for us. Something that keeps us going, gives us a bit of excitement. Otherwise, life could become a little bit dull. What we tend to be thinking about when we think about stress is large amounts of stress or stress that lasts for too long. What we think about as chronic or bad stress. Now, Lazarus and Folkman have given us a very useful way of understanding stress. They say that stress doesn't just happen to you. Certainly, stress-provoking events happen, but between the event happening and our response, what intervenes is our thoughts, our interpretation of a situation. When an event happens, we evaluate it. We weigh the demands of the situation against our resources, our skills, and we decide whether or not we have the skills to be able to cope. And if we say to ourselves, wow, I have no idea what to do here. This is way too much for me. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't do this. Well, then you're going to have the stress response, which is what we understand as the fight or flight response with our heart pounding and our thoughts racing and our palms getting sweaty. And yet, it doesn't have to be like that. What Lazarus and Folkman also help us understand is that in positive situations, an event can occur. When we weigh the demands of the situation against our skills, we may actually decide that we've got it covered, that we know how to do everything that's required to be able to master that situation. And we say to ourselves, I've been here, I've done this before, I've got this covered, I know what to do. We don't perceive the demands as being overwhelming, and we simply say, well, let's get on with it. And in that case, there isn't the stress response. Our heart doesn't pound, our thoughts aren't racing, our palms aren't getting sweaty. And so the message here is that a situation is stressful when you decide that it is, that we do have some control. Why do we care so much about stress? Well, we care about chronic stress because of how it affects us. Chronic stress affects your mind, your body, and your behavior. That you may be experiencing negative feelings, your emotions are on an emotional roller coaster, your thoughts are negative, you may have headaches, difficulty concentrating, stomach pain, your muscles ache, your appetite's off, you feel tired, you just don't feel like yourself. And you can see that when chronic stress has a negative effect on your mind, body, and behavior, it's very difficult to be an effective volunteer. Now, for those of you who are sitting there with your heart starting to pound because you notice that you've got a number of these signs of stress, it's okay. The effects of chronic stress are preventable and reversible, which is why we're here today. Because your goal as a volunteer is to have more great volunteer experiences and less bad or chronic stress. And we're going to look at ways in which you can do this, beginning with understanding the challenges of being a volunteer. Where does the stress come from? So we're going to talk a bit about some of the challenges of volunteering, not as a means of just whining and complaining. This isn't what they call a pity party, but really, it's impossible to have a solution that's really effective unless you know what problem you're dealing with. And as we go through this, I'd like you to think about your personal experience of volunteering and jot down which of the challenges are important to you. And we're going to use this to frame the conversation. Volunteers tend to be people who jump in and help and want to participate in the world around them. And they juggle a lot of activities. What are you juggling? When we did the survey of volunteers and we asked, what's your biggest source of stress? We found that people almost 49% of people reported that their source of stress wasn't one particular area like school or work or finances. It was the fact that they were juggling multiple areas at once. So we know that stress comes from the activities around us, the world around us, but also stress comes from our own thoughts and our own behaviors. Sometimes we're our worst enemy with our negative self-talk. We put ourselves down. We're very critical of ourselves sometimes. We worry a lot at times. We catastrophize. That's what Burns called the fine art of making mountains out of molehills. And in addition to that, sometimes the very helping behaviors that allow us to be so useful in the community are the very same ones that actually hamper us in our ability to help effectively. For example, being a martyr, just always being self-sacrificing even though you hate it, giving too much, not knowing when to stop giving, trying to rescue people or animals that don't want to be helped. So these are some of the things that we do in terms of our negative self-talk and our negative helping behaviors that actually contribute to our stress levels. And in addition, we found that there are challenges associated with volunteering. And in the survey, people reported a number of areas, and here they are in alphabetical order. Dealing with the organization. Many of us do our volunteer work within or affiliated with organizations. And every organization has its own flavor, its own culture. And we need to learn how to navigate that. And so people sometimes find it challenging to deal with the paperwork and processes and cultures and deadlines and funding that goes along with the organization. So at the same time that it's a reward to have the organizations there and supporting us, sometimes we have some challenges. Feeling pressure to do more. This was something that people talked about a lot. Not being able to say no, feeling as though they have to take on the world, and not having enough time. Now, interpersonal relationships, if you'll recall, was one of the bonuses of volunteering. And it's sometimes a double-edged sword because there's sometimes challenges associated with the interpersonal relationships that we encounter as we volunteer, whether it's from staff at the organizations, fellow volunteers, and even the people that we're helping. Not enough volunteers, time, or money to do what's needed, and that you know what you want to do, but you just can't do it all. That's something that came up quite frequently. And then seeing others in distress. Now, the irony is that for many of us, one of the things that draws us to volunteering is our desire to alleviate distress, to make life better for people, animals, and at the same time, it's difficult to have to see that distress. So, again, I'd like you to pause and identify which of these areas is your big challenge. Because as we talk about stress busters, we're going to find stress busters that match your particular situation so that we can come up with a program, a plan that's more effective for you. So let's take some time right now and think. Is your biggest challenge dealing with the organization? Feeling pressure to do more? Interpersonal relationships? Not having enough volunteers, time, or money? Or seeing others in distress? So now that you've recognized the main rewards that you're gleaning and one of the big hurdles that you want to be able to overcome, it's time to take control of your stress levels. So in the old days, I used to just bang my head against the wall and I was going absolutely nowhere until I realized that there definitely is a better way to do this. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through these 4 simple steps that I've come up with, and they are all building on who you are today and what you already know. so that you don't have to run out and change your diet, learn how to do handstands, start running, or do anything other than look at the skills that you already have and use these 4 simple steps to reframe how you think about things and to organize how you go through the world. So we're going to talk about how to scan, how to stop, how to step, and then how to start afresh. We'll begin with the 3-point stress check. That's one way of scanning how your stress levels are changing as you go through the day. And I'd like you to do this along with me. The first thing that you check are your shoulders. Our shoulders are often the biggest culprit when we are getting stressed. We hold a lot of tension there. It's one of the most common places. And as you go through the day, your shoulders gradually keep creeping up towards your ears until you find that you're wearing your shoulders as earrings. So I'd like you to check your shoulders right now and see if you've got tension there. Now, the second thing to check is your breathing. Stress changes our breathing in 2 ways. The first, and often the most common, is that it goes faster, that we find ourselves panting, and that our breathing is becoming shallow and rapid. What people don't often recognize is that the opposite is also a form of stress breathing, where your breathing slows. And so check your breathing. Are you panting, or is your breathing slowing down? And if you're not sure which direction your breathing goes in when you're under stress, the next time you just feel as though you're about to lose it, I'd like you to pause for a moment and check in with your breathing to see if it's faster or slower. Now, the other thing to check is your thoughts. Now, if you remember from Lazarus and Folkman, a situation is stressful when you decide that it is. So if your heart is pounding and your mouth is going dry and your thoughts are racing, it's because you've said something negative to yourself. And too often, these messages go by so quickly and are so subconscious that we don't even realize that we've done it. So here's a 3-point stress check. You check your shoulders, your breathing, and your thoughts. So what do you do if you realize that your shoulders are tense, you're panting like a puppy dog, and you're thinking negative things? Well, it's time to take action to lower your stress. And here's how you can do it. Let's go through the quick stress buster together. This is actually one of my favorite ways for being able to keep my stress levels under control as I go through the day. Now, if you'll recall, the first thing we checked was our shoulders. Well, if your shoulders are getting tense, let's find a way to change those shoulders. Now, as you're sitting there, I'd like you to make big, slow circles with your shoulders. Roll them back, and now roll them forward. Bring them up to your ears, give them a shake, and let your tension go. That's one way of changing the tension in your shoulders. Now, I realize that if you're in a volunteer situation or another professional situation, it's really difficult to just stop and start doing shoulder rolls. So I'm going to teach you what I call the undercover professional way of dealing with your shoulder tension. I'd like all of you to raise your shoulders a centimeter. And for those of you who aren't metric, half an inch. Just until you can feel the muscles starting to tighten. And hold that. Now you can carry on a conversation, you can do whatever you need to, holding this teeny bit of tension in your shoulders. Continue to hold it there. Hold that tension with your shoulders just very slightly raised. Feel how tight those muscles are. And now drop your shoulders. It makes a difference. You can lower your shoulders, let that tension go, and no one will be any wiser. So you checked your shoulders and you changed them if you saw tension. Now, what do you do if you're going blue in the face or sounding like a puppy dog? Well, it's really important to change your breathing. And if there's one thing that you remember to do at any point when you're trying to control your stress level, I'd pick breathing. So you want to take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. And we breathe in through our noses for a couple of reasons. First of all, it warms and moistens the air. Have you noticed when you're getting stressed and you start breathing through your mouth that your mouth gets really dry? And that sort of compounds that whole feeling of being tense and anxious. Breathing through your nose adds moisture and it warms the air. And there's another important reason why we do this. I'd like you to try to take 10 breaths through your nose very, very quickly. It's pretty hard, isn't it? It is next to impossible to hyperventilate when you're breathing through your nose. And so the other reason that you take a breath in through your nose is to be able to slow your breathing down. And it also relaxes the muscles around your neck. So slow breath in through your nose and sigh the air out through your mouth. Now, one of the other secrets to sighing the air out through your mouth is to purse your lips, to make an O with your lips as you sigh the air out. And what this does is it creates a positive pressure in your airways, and it takes away that feeling that you sometimes have as you're getting really stressed, that your lungs are kind of collapsing in and that you can't get enough air. So in through your nose, slow breath out through your mouth with your lips pursed, and let that tension go. Now, if you recall, a situation is stressful when you decide that it is. So the most important thing that you need to do is to switch your thoughts. Change them. Now, I don't know about you. When I'm falling apart and crashing and burning, I can't think warm, fuzzy thoughts. I can't think, wow, CK, that's amazing. You've got this. You've got everything covered. This is great. I can't. But what I can do is I can think neutral thoughts. This is when I recite my grocery list. 3 cans of peas, 1 carton of milk, 1 bag of rice. And as I recite my grocery list, it stops that hamster wheel of negative thoughts and allows me to get calm again and choose a new direction. So I'd like all of you to pause for a moment and think about what your neutral list could be. And I'd like you to think about it now because when you're in a stress-provoking situation, it will be very, very difficult for you to stop and try to come up with a neutral list. So is it going to be a list of your favorite magazines or the favorite books that you've read, your favorite type of dog, your favorite types of chocolate? Think of your neutral list. Take a moment to jot that down so it'll be a reminder to yourself. So there you have it. Change your shoulders, change your breathing, change your thoughts. The quick stress buster. Now, in reality, you can't go through every minute of the day using the quick stress buster. You need to have something a bit more comprehensive. And that's where the stress busters come in. So I've organized them into 7 categories of stress busters, and we're going to go through them in a bit more detail. And in addition, I'm going to email you a copy of 60 Stress Busters for volunteers. What people in my workshops have done is they have compiled the 60 examples of stress busters that they've used day to day that they find the most useful. So as a follow-up, you'll be getting a copy of this as a PDF. So when we did the survey, this time and in other workshops, we've asked people which physical stress busters they would use. Physical stress busters are things that you can do with your body or for your body that will help to take your stress levels down a notch. And people came up with a range of different things that they do. And take a look here and see if there are any that you use or that you could use. Whether it's breathing exercises, drinking herbal tea or water, having some chocolate, eating right, getting out there and gardening, resting, hiking or swimming, some sport, any form of physical exercise, doing a relaxation technique, trying something like yoga, sleeping, and making sure that you sleep regardless of how many things there are on your list of things to do, because sleep actually is a priority. So as we go through these, I'd also like you to think about what you chose as your big challenge in volunteering. and see if any of these particular physical stress busters or any others that you might know might be helpful to you in overcoming that challenge. Mental stress busters. Mental stress busters are things that you can do in your mind, mentally, or for your mind, like learning. And here are a couple examples of what people said that they do. Focusing on the positive things in life. Remember that if we think about positive things and start reframing things in a positive way, then when we're evaluating a stress-provoking situation, we're more likely to tell ourselves that we're able to cope. Looking at what's causing stress and planning how you're going to address it, and looking at what you're able to change. Looking at mental relaxation techniques like meditation. Reframing stressful moments, so looking at that whole evaluation you have, and instead of going, oh my gosh, I can't cope, to be able to find something positive in your resources, to be able to say, no, I think I can do this. Thinking about your insights, and coming back to what we talked about with the rewards of volunteering, trying to remember why you're doing what you're doing. What motivates this? What drives this? Personal stress busters. These are really critical. Being isolated actually really increases our perceptions of the amount of stress that we have. And so it's important that we get support from people, pets, plants, wherever we can. And these can include a variety of things. They have, folks on the surveys suggested chatting and enjoying time with family, friends, reaching out to them, listening to them, talking to them, being able to get out with pets as well, whether it's with hanging out with cats and dogs, taking the dog for a walk, cuddling with a kitten, knowing that there's social activities that you can do outside of your friend and family group, which are also important. And someone put in here meals with a friend, and we have to recognize that meals with others, friends and family, are a really important source of comfort. So remembering that it's important to have personal support. So keep thinking about each of these that we go through and how it might relate to that challenge that you identify that you're dealing with as a volunteer. Emotional stress busters. We can't hide from our emotions, and many people try to bury them. And what we find is that if we try to bury our emotions or pretend that they don't exist, they simply pop up in another form. And so it's really critical to vent or deal with your emotions in some way. Some people suggested to avoid them. So just staying away from the bad vibes, people, and situations that bring negativity. In the same way, cutting out activities that cause stress. But there are also a number of ways, other than staying away from stress-provoking people and activities, to be able to vent the negative emotions and stress that we're dealing with. Whether it's listening to music, talking it out, trying to say no without feeling guilty or selfish, and a million of different ways of venting. And as you think about venting, keep in mind that you want to find something that is positive for you and others so that nothing and no one gets harmed in the process, whether you cry, scream, including silent screaming, where you just do all the motions of screaming, but there is no sound, pounding pillows, journaling. Find something that is really therapeutic for you. Get organized. It's amazing how much disorganization can contribute to our stress levels. Walking into a cluttered room or dealing with a cluttered desk or having a million things going on, but you don't know what your priorities are or haven't tried to sort things out. So here are a couple strategies that folks suggested. And I'd like you to think about, again, that challenge that you identified in volunteering to look at which of these might be helpful to you, whether it's cleaning, creating lists, and doing stuff, identifying and focusing on priorities that you can keep a balance between work and fun, managing your calendar in some way that allows you to protect your time and plan ahead and stay on schedule. And in organizing yourself, it's really important to make sure that you're not overcommitted, that everything tends to take at least twice as long as the time that we tend to allot for it. And so we should overestimate how long things take, and not have every single minute of every single day blocked in. And that when you have important commitments, to stay loyal to the ones that are most critical, personal ones, as well as those related to work and volunteering. Someone also mentioned managing up, and I thought that this one was particularly useful in dealing with the challenges that come with dealing with the organization in which you may be volunteering. So, with managing up, thinking about the ways in which you can manage the environment in which you're volunteering. Once you understand their particular culture, to be able to look at ways in which you can more effectively navigate the culture, find a mentor, understand some key strategies to help you be able to either say no effectively or take on the duties that you like. Now, there's a lot you can do to deal with the situation at hand, but sometimes it's important just to take your mind off things. And this is where the diversions come in. And it amazes me how many different diversions people can think of. So even as you're thinking about the the challenge that you're facing in volunteering, the things that make you feel overwhelmed, take a look over this list and see if there are any things that you can do, which would just be a fun way of taking your mind off things. Whether you take a day off, do some puzzles, get into the kitchen, do nothing, figure out which works best for you, and make sure you take the time to take your mind off things. And I'd like to wrap up the area on the stress busters by talking about spiritual stress busters. Too often, as we begin to feel stressed and overwhelmed, it's because we're losing touch with the more spiritual part of ourselves. And by spirituality, I'm not limiting that to religion. I'm thinking about the broader sense of spirituality. Religion's part of that continuum, but it's also how we fit into the world, how we're part of nature, and just the part of us, which is the not necessarily logical, work-oriented part of ourselves. So just reconnecting with ourselves, our core. And so here are some of the suggestions that folks had for ways in which you can do something spiritual. And sometimes just being quiet, having quiet time for yourself, taking time for yourself at all is a luxury that we don't often afford for ourselves, especially as volunteers, because we're always looking around us for ways in which we can help others. Journaling, being able to put down our thoughts and look over them and be a little more introspective is a helpful way of reconnecting. Getting out into nature, whether you go for a walk or take the time to watch the sunrise or sunset, helps us put things into perspective and to recognize that regardless of how miserable today is, tomorrow the sun is still going to come up and tomorrow the sun is still going to go down, and that we're part of something greater, and that helps us put the situation into perspective. Practicing mindfulness, spiritual practices, all of these and more are part of the spiritual stress busters that you can use. So I'd like you to stop at this point and pause for a moment and think back to that challenge that you identified for yourself in your volunteer work. And I'd like you to think of these 7 areas and jot down any physical, mental, personal support, emotional, organizational, diversionary, or spiritual strategies that you can use to overcome those challenges and keep your stress levels under control. Now, before you use a stress buster, it's important to ask yourself 3 questions. The first is this a positive strategy or will it cause problems? There's some that we think are pretty obvious. We can go, well, recreational drugs, that will help us have a quick escape, but over time, they can cause problems in themselves. But it's also important to keep in mind that sometimes seemingly positive things can become negative if they're used to excess. For example, exercise. It's great. It's a good way of improving our health and wellness as well as dealing with our stress. At the same time, if exercise is your major focus in life and you find yourself sacrificing all sorts of other things just to be able to have more gym time, then that's no longer a positive strategy. So ask yourself, is this positive or will it cause problems? The second thing to ask yourself is this appropriate? For the time and place. I may find that chanting is really relaxing and really helps me deal with stress. But at the same time, if I'm in a boardroom, that may cause more trouble than it's worth, and it's not appropriate. And then lastly, is this short term or long term? A quick fix or something that addresses the problem? Take a look at any of the stress busters that you've chosen so far, and I'd like you to identify which ones are positive, which ones are appropriate, and which ones will be helpful short term or long term. So we've identified the rewards that we get from volunteering, our key challenges that we're trying to overcome, and we've looked at a range of different stress busters that we can use, whether it's this quick stress buster or any of the 7 other stress busters. And we have the 3 questions that help us to evaluate them and select them. And now we get to a part that I find is equally important as all the planning, and that's to start afresh after each situation. When a situation is over, it's important to put it behind you. It's important to go into every new situation with a clean slate. Too often what we do is instead of letting go of the stress, that we hang on to what happened in a situation and wear it like a badge of courage for weeks, months, years. Think about it. Have you at any point during the past week replayed a situation that didn't go the way that you wanted to? You know how we do that? We go over what they said, and then we think about what we could have said or what we could have done so that it would work out a little differently. And what happens when we do that? As we're replaying that situation, we actually start to experience the emotions that we did then. You can actually feel yourself getting tense and upset. Your body starts to experience all of the same symptoms and your emotions change. And so we actually are re-experiencing that situation. So it's really important to let yourself recognize that what you did at that time was the best that you could have with who you were and what you knew. And if you can think of a better approach right now, it's because you're learning. So allow yourself to learn. Start small. Too often we try to take on the world at the very, very first outset. And so it's important to realize that we just cut off a teeny little piece of the entire challenge and tackle that first before we do the others. And be flexible. Have your plan, but also have plan B. And if plan B doesn't seem to be working out for you, be prepared to ditch plan B and try plan C or wing it. Because one of the biggest sources of stress is sticking to a plan that just isn't working for you. So be flexible. And take it slowly. Too often we are so eager to do better that we try to change really quickly. And the human psyche is like a rubber band that when we try to stretch it too quickly, that it'll snap or simply rebound to what it was before. But if we slowly stretch ourselves, it accommodates and we're able to grow. And then finally, believe in yourself. Now, for some adults, this sounds and feels really hokey. And yet, what is it that we tell children? We tell them to believe in themselves. And that actually is very critical when we're dealing with stress. If we go back to Lazarus and Folkman's explanation about our self-evaluation, you can see that if you believe in yourself, when you're faced with a situation, it's going to be easier for you to list all the things that you already know how to do to help yourself cope. So believe in yourself. And there you have it, 4 steps. We talked about scanning with a 3-point stress check, knowing when to stop your stress, how to step into the stress-free zone by using the quick stress buster and all the other stress busters, and then how to start afresh. And I'd like to leave you with a quote that I just love and wish I'd come up with myself, which is that to be free of destructive stress, don't sweat the small stuff, and realize that in the grand scheme, all stuff is small. So please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. You can feel free to email me, message me on Facebook, and also I have weekly stress busting tips on Twitter. And if you look for the hashtag help more stress less, you'll be able to find them. So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to open it up to any questions that folks may have in the remaining 5 or so minutes that we have. So one question that's come up is, where do I start? We've gone through a lot of information today, I realize, and it may be difficult to try to figure out what's the starting block where you begin. And so my suggestion is to go back to that challenge that you're facing. And if you have more than one challenge, then make a list of your challenges and tackle them one at a time. For each challenge, write down how you respond in that situation. What happens to your mind, your body, and your behaviors? In other words, when you're in it, how will you know that you're getting stressed? And then the second thing to do is to identify from those 7 types of stress busters which ones you can use. So depending on the situation, if it's trying to deal with another volunteer or someone at the volunteer organization that's frustrating for you, is it that you'll need to do some emotional venting before you begin? And so in coming up with all the different strategies, match them to each situation, and then ask yourself the 3 questions about what's appropriate and what's helpful. And that will be a useful way to begin. Any other questions? Well, it looks as though that's what it is in terms of folks having questions that they want to ask here. Again, please feel free to get in touch. I'm really delighted that we were able to spend some time together, and that I hope that you've been able to find one helpful nugget that you'll be able to take away with you as you go through your volunteering. Thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon.